are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. Happy Tuesday. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended podcast, and founder of the Blended Pledge. And we've got a really exciting show for you today. Jeff from Manhattan and Associates is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about forecast accuracy. We're going to be talking about 3D printing in space. And there's a new term that I learned from this article that I want to share with you. Plus, we're going to be talking about NRF. They have this study that they pulled back on, and we're going to be telling you why. Now, if you're in the audience, I want to hear from you. So make sure that you put in the comments where you're tuning in from, because we'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions throughout the show, let us know. But first, let's hear from our show sponsors. So are you ready to find your community? If you're struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, look no further. Head over to Secret Society of Supply Chain. We have a membership for everyone in the industry with all sorts of amazing benefits and networking events and so much more. So head over there, check it out, and sign up today. All right, let's get to our first update. So this is our brand new episode, and TSG Fleet, they came on the show to talk all about what they are doing on the West Coast. They're talking about maintenance. They're talking about so much more, and they're making a really huge impact in the industry. Now, if you missed this episode, we talked about who they are, what they do, why you should know about them, how they can help you on episode 431, wherever you listen to the show. So head over and check that out because you're not going to want to miss that episode. All right, what's coming up next? On Halloween, actually, Thursday, October 31st at 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be talking to Miriam from SDI about conquering inflation. Now, this is the purchasing's number one threat, and we're going to give you everything that you need to know to be able to conquer that and be able to move forward with your teams and into 2025 and so much more. Next, we've got Relax Talks Wednesday, November 13th at 9 a.m. Eastern. That's my birthday. I'm going to be in Atlanta, but Relax is going to be with you live on the Let's Talk Supply Chain channels, talking about demand sensing, the key to supply chain excellence. You're not going to want to miss that. So for either of those, click the attend button and we will send you the link, even if you cannot attend live. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but on the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn page, we've been sharing, and the Instagram page, actually, we have been sharing some really cool tidbits about different industries and the concerns that they have around supply chain. Now, just the other day, we put this out, the State of Canadian promo industry, and they talk about how they think about supply chain disruption, how it's improved, and how they are thinking about it, number of orders delivered on time, and so much really great information that we tend to think about supply chain as broad, but obviously it has different impacts on different industries. And so we're trying to share that with you. So go and check that out on our LinkedIn page. Plus, we just did a major announcement that we have partnered with CPKC. And a few months ago, we were on site there and we did a video and photo shoot with CPKC. And so we're going to be rolling out some really great content from that day. And I cannot wait to share that with you. So stay tuned. If you don't follow us on LinkedIn or Instagram, follow us today because you're not going to want to miss out on that. Oops, I went to the wrong one. All right. Next, last but not least, before we bring Jeff up, just want to let you know where I'm going to be. I'm going to be at the NMFTA conference October 27th through 29th. I believe it's sold out, but if you are there, come and say hi, and I'm going to be reporting live from there. November 12th and 13th, I'm going to be in Atlanta for the Women in Supply Chain Forum, and then in February 10th through 12th, I'll be at Manifest as well. All right, it is time to bring up our guest for today. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks. How you doing?
Good.
It's a good Tuesday. I don't know where you are, but the sun is shining here,
Oh yeah.
and we've had some pretty decent weather for October, not gonna lie.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was very, very nice weekend, and looks to be a good week ahead. So
Awesome. So for those who don't know who you are, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
sure. So I head up the science group within the R&D organization of Manhattan Associates.
Mhm.
So, being a enterprise software vendor, we have many different product teams that build our product, our applications, and then my team is responsible for all of the science, if you will, that goes into those things like mathematical modeling, optimization, operations research, data science, AI/ML. Typically, anything with a Greek symbol that goes into our products is typically come from our team.
Awesome. I love that. I mean, I've got a real scientist on the show today. That doesn't happen very often. And Jeff, you're actually going to be on a podcast soon. We've got that coming out over the next couple of weeks as well, where we dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics. So everybody stay tuned for that. Now, before we move on to the poll, I just want to give a shout out to everybody on my personal LinkedIn, Eric, Rob, Audria, Peter, thank you so much for joining us. If you are here, make sure to put your comments for under the Let's Talk Supply Chain page, and I'll put you on the screen. All right, let's get to the poll. So the question that we asked everybody, and we do this poll every single Wednesday morning, and it's a great way for us to, keep a pulse on the community and find out what people are thinking about and how they're thinking about supply chain. So, which source of external data do you think will be most useful in powering your supply chain planning success? Now, we had about 70 votes on this one. 59% of you said, and I don't even know if I'm going to say this right. Econometric? Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's right. Econometric.
I was looking at that word and I was like, okay, Sarah's going to butcher that one. And then we had a tie for 14% weather and social media / consumer opinion. And then what's funny to me on this one is that 12% of you clicked the other button, but then forgot to comment below. So we actually don't know what you meant to say. So next time, if you're going to click the other button, make sure you comment below so we can see it. We can give you a shout out on the show and find out what you're thinking. Now, Jeff, was this surprising to you? What do you think about these results?
No. It's not surprising at all. This is kind of what I expected, honestly, to some degree. I was hoping to get a little bit more insight on the other, though, because econometric data, weather, social, consumer, and customer sentiment, those are the kind of the usual suspects, and econometric indicators and variables are usually always the leading set because they provide value from a macroeconomic perspective, right? Because they heavily influence or reflect, consumer spending patterns, business investments, even pricing strategies, right? On a long-term basis and a short-term. Because as unemployment rates, go up or down, so does, many disposable income levels for many people go up and down as well.
And so all of that is covered because this is a new term for me, and maybe it's not a new term for everybody else, but I've never seen econometric before.
Yeah, it's things like the GDP, like the gross domestic product, consumer confidence indices, consumer price index, things like that, typically government agencies, banks, a number of other regulatory agencies as well, generate that data. And it's heavily leaned on by many governments, for one thing, banks and businesses as well. So it's pretty reliable indicators for at least macroeconomic trends. And some of that information can be used regionally as well, or in certain types of demographics. It crosses over to some of the other external factors like demographics.
And so what would you have liked to see in the other column?
Well, the usual ones, something about competitor data, I think is a very interesting one, just because, and that's across different industries. It doesn't have to be typically, and people think, well, it's not true. I guess it depends on what supply chain you're in or what business you're in. It's not all just retail. It's true across the board, right, for every industry. Monitoring, price changes, new product launches, promotion activity, marketing campaigns, even, store openings or expansion, things like that can impact, your product base, either in a negative or a positive way, or allows you to kind of at least adjust to that dynamic. Another thing is demographics is another big one too. Aging population, regional population growth rates, urbanization trends, and then local events. I mean, I go on and on here, but local events is another big one, like sporting events, conferences, concerts, like, the Taylor Swift effect.
Yeah.
Especially for retail in a certain area, she's coming to town.
Yeah.
There's usually a surge in certain, for certain retail stores and outlets because of that.
Huh. Interesting. Well, also in hotels and restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just boosts the economy. And I don't think anybody wants her to stop touring. I mean,
no. That's, exactly. She's good for the economy.
All right. So now's the time of the show where I usually ask for a bit of a market update. Can you give us, from your point of view, what are you seeing in the market? What should maybe people be thinking about, focusing on? I mean, we are heading into a new year. We're heading into a decision that's going to be made. So what are you thinking? What should people be talking about, thinking about, helping to make them decisions?
Well, I think it may seem like a bit of a cop-out being a scientist, data scientist, but AI/ML, and especially generative AI, 2024 was a big year for generative AI for sure, but there was a lot of growing pains still. A lot of companies coming to terms and grappling with how to leverage it, as well as, technology providers, infrastructure and frameworks to support successful productization, either internally or commercially, being able to leverage that. I see a lot more of that happening next year, and really getting traction, because a lot of those systems and processes have hardened quite a bit. Let me say it again, hardened quite a bit. So they've matured, they've stabilized quite a bit, and there's a lot of more reliability from those capabilities now.
And so
another area.
They're going to be ready to sort of expand and really dive into those, because a lot of people are chasing that big shining object, but we don't want them to do that. That foundation needs to be done first, and then you're bringing that in.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And that's true for just anything in AI/ML. Don't go, drinking the Kool-Aid and chasing those shiny objects and, having shiny object syndrome. You want to have, because the major reason why a lot of those initiatives fail is because of the underlying infrastructure, and really, vetting out the problem itself, or what you're trying to achieve, getting that very solid and proven out, then proceed forward with it. And I would say 2024 was a big year for that. So I think next year should be a pretty interesting year for generative AI across a number of functions and roles, within supply chain.
So if you're not already thinking about generative AI, you definitely need to be thinking about it now.
Yes. And the last thing here too, and I know this, it sounds like, okay, this probably was the trend, 4 or 5 years ago, but it's data-driven decision-making, advanced analytics, intelligent automation, that's been growing. But I would say really over the past year or so, and I can see this continuing to grow next year, it are the digital transformations that many companies are still working through, right? And where that comes into play, especially for leveraging advanced intelligent automation, is by bringing in enriched internal data, as well as meaningful external data, into all of these analytical models and ML models to enrich overall decision making, and provide an outside in, kind of planning capability, not only to, like, let's say, a demand planning or supply chain planning solution, but how that then can, elevate other, applications that integrate with supply chain planning.
I love that. And so many things to think about. But if we're not thinking about these things, we're going to definitely be left behind. I want to give a shout out to Audrey as well. She says she's loving this conversation. So we're glad that you are here. And if anybody has any questions, make sure you put that in the comments, because, it's not very often I have a data scientist here on Thoughts and Coffee. And so let's make the most of it, people. If you've got questions, put it in the comments, and let's put Jeff on the spot. All right.
Exactly. Bring it on.
So So, our first article is about forecast accuracy. Now, Manhattan put this ultimate guide from data to decisions together for you. And I was going through this, and it's interesting, right? Because we use these words in different contexts. And one of the things that stood out for me, because I do a lot of work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, is the word bias. And I always use it in the context of DEI, but it's actually used in the context of forecast accuracy. And that bias can actually come into the equation. So, talk to us about this guide. Why should people take a look at it? What will they learn? And, talk to us a little bit about that. And why is bias even part of the equation?
Yeah, actually, bias in demand forecasting is basically the same concept that you're describing DEI. DEI, sorry, is predictive models, if they're not trained properly or they have incorrect or misleading data, they become what's called biased, is they typically will lean to either under forecasting or over forecasting in a consistent manner. It's interesting, even if the model has some dynamic aspects to it to help improve and tune itself over time, it's continuing to fight against that. So the article itself is not just about bias, but I think people don't consider or appreciate kind of the impact of bias in the data that you're using to build your models from. The article overall provides a good set of demand forecasting principles and practices for demand planning teams. And reinforces that good demand forecasting is having a good method is only part of the puzzle. You need good practices, because there's a number of factors that influence a model's ability to accurately forecast. And basically it comes down to this: a better data model yields a better predictive model, or a more well-defined, informed, and cleaner data model yields a better predictive model. So, and the article kind of reinforces this and gives examples about how to go through these things and so forth. And a lot of this, based on certain systems that you're using, may be automated internally, but you still want to have your teams to some degree oversee, report and have visualization and have some kind of influence over these things, because, what's the classic quote, forecast models, or it's really models, are always wrong. It's just that some can be useful. So predict.
That doesn't help.
Forecast models are always wrong. It's just that sometimes they're useful, or sometimes they're better than others or whatever. But you're always chasing that perfect prediction, but you'll never get it because there's just inherent noise, inherent randomness in the data. So no matter how much automation you have, there still has to be human interaction, visibility, reporting, monitoring, and things like that. So you want to reduce that load and only provide, really meaningful things they should focus on. And, a number of systems, especially that we provide as well, help with that. But it provides a set of, these things. And you always want to measure and benchmark what you're doing as well. I think that's the thing that many people miss. The measuring part they get, but the benchmarking piece is missed through forecast value added, or forecast value add, or just even having reference benchmarks internally, because often, we'll go into a new customer and they'll say, when we'll do some forecasting for a certain category of their business, and we come back with, some percentage of accuracy, and they're like, oh, why isn't it doing better? Well, what's the forecastability of the data? Like, in other words, the volatility, the uncertainty inherent to the demand itself, as well as what are the benchmark standards for that? And then when they find out that they're, 10, 20, 30% under what we're providing, then it's like, oh, okay. So don't always just latch onto the fact that I've got to have, 90% accuracy for every category of my product catalog. It varies. So you need to do this additional, analysis and vetting and so forth.
So I have a question for you, but before I get to it, Charlotte says bias is built into everything, I would assume. So when we're thinking about data, can we safely assume that bias is inherently built into everything and we need to be cognizant of it?
It can be built into everything. So in other words, what I mean by that is it can be elusive. In some situations, it may not be present. and others it might be, but you always have to look for it. You always have to be vigilant and monitor and seek that out, because if it's there, then your demand planning process will just be fighting that battle constantly until you get that resolved.
Thank you for that question. Now, I have one really quick question before we go to the next one. What is success in forecasting? Like, what
Yeah.
should we be looking for? What does success mean to us? How can we communicate that to, leadership, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. Well, I think some of that comes through, and it's called out in the document as well, in the article, through this benchmarking mechanism and the forecast value add, as well as what is the impact to the end business, right? So demand forecast and having accurate forecasts there is great, but what is the impact, let's say, to an inventory system and an ordering system, or even further down, how does that impact from a procurement and logistics perspective? So being able to take that information and simulate that, its impact network wide, and then showing that degree of influence is really what you want to strive for. Because reporting 90%, 70%, or we've improved it, 2% or 20 basis points or something, it doesn't really help much when you're reporting to higher ups, right? And I know most people probably already realize this, but I think that connection between the two is often lost, at least down at the middle layer of people involved in these processes.
Well, I thank you for sharing that. Now, I also want to give a shout out before we move on to the next article. Bryant was recently on the show. Bryant from Manhattan was recently on the show, episode 430. He talked about unifying supply chain systems, which takes this to a whole nother level. So go check it out if you did not listen to that. All right. So our second article, and it looks a little bit funny, but we are talking about 3D printing parts in space. Now, I don't know if you know this, but recently they were able to 3D print a metal part while in space. And now this is going to take us to a whole new level. And this article also gave me a brand new term I had never even heard of, which is in-orbit manufacturing. So if we're not thinking about manufacturing on a global level or maybe intergalactic level, it's coming, people, and we need to be prepared. So, Jeff, what did you think about this article? I'm pretty sure as a data scientist, you were like, wow, like this is going to take my job to another level.
Oh, yeah. Well, my background originally was in physics. So I always had, I was actually straddling the fence between staying in basically chaos theory in my field, or going to astrophysics, or I ended up going to supply chain, which very natural kind of next step, but always had an interest in that. So yeah, this is fascinating because the obviously, and they point out albeit pretty brief, but you can link out to other articles to get more details, but just the complexities and challenges of trying to do that in a gravity-free environment. And yeah, because the mechanisms that are used here on Earth, there's an inherent kind of reliability that you're going to have gravity. And so not having that, right, changes a lot of things with respect to the physics, the material science, a lot of things that go into actually generating and building and layering out, the 3D printing process.
Well, I think we need to think about the logistics of the raw materials, how we're going to get that up to
yeah, Manhattan's, we're on that. That's a part of our 20-year roadmap. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, is space on the roadmap for Manhattan?
Yeah. I don't know.
I think it's on the roadmap for everybody, but you're right. Some of the things that I didn't realize, because we've been talking about 3D printing for a while and it's sort of shaking up manufacturing here on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
But now we're looking at it shaking things up in space, and that leads into a whole bunch of things. If you think about forecast accuracy and planning, when we think about raw materials going to space, I mean, we don't even think about that right now. You need to get that right here on Earth first. But I didn't realize how much gravity played into it, right? And some of the things that they've grappled with is that gravity can lead to poor quality and actually placing the product incorrectly within the 3D printer, or the raw materials within the 3D printer as well. So it's interesting having to look at that in a microgravity environment. These are all terms that I've learned today.
Well, then also, I mean, being in that kind of environment, dealing with, they use lasers to heat it, right? Because you have to melt the wire down in order to create the metal 3D printed object.
Mhm.
And the temperatures they had to get to, and it's kind of crazy, that they're doing this type of operation inside the ISS, along with all the other, challenging things they could be facing up there. It's pretty
So
interesting, pretty
true.
brave, I would say, of the folks doing it.
So true. We've got
Pioneers.
Larry over on my personal LinkedIn. That's pretty cool. And then I want to give a shout out to Richard. He's there as well. All right, let's get to our last article because we've got a couple of minutes to talk about this one. So NRF, we wanted to bring up NRF. NRF is coming up soon. Manhattan and Associates are going to be there. They're going to have a booth there. So if you have any more questions on any of the topics that we've talked about today, you definitely want to go see them because they can talk through forecast accuracy and demand planning and unification of supply chains as well. But what's interesting about this article, and one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this up, is because they usually publish an annual shrink report every single year. And they've actually taken a step back and they won't be reporting on that. They're actually going to be drilling down on theft, which I thought was fairly interesting. Now, Jeff, before I get into more detail, what is shrink? Because I've been hearing about this a lot. I've been talking about this a lot on the podcast. But for those who are hearing the term but don't necessarily understand it, what is shrink? Why is it important to retailers?
Yeah, at its most basic definition, I guess shrink is when inventory at a location is less than what's expected or less than what's recorded or what the system or systems using that inventory think that is available at that location. And it's due to a variety of reasons. The biggest one, and which the article focuses on quite a bit, is theft, external theft and internal theft. And there's various degrees of, proportions of that, but there's been a growing trend, even violent, activities, violent theft, right, which is kind of skewing and changing some of the direction that the NRF is wanting to take and consider as part of this.
Well, and I think that was the most surprising thing for me is that they're going to focus on retail theft and violence.
Mm-hmm.
I was recently in a store and somebody had taken a box of shoes and was walking out of the store. And the security guard behind them was like, dude, you need to leave the shoes behind. We know you have the shoes in your bag. Just leave them behind. There's cameras everywhere. You're going to get caught. But he kept walking. And he walked out of the store and I, under my breath, said, I wonder why they didn't do anything about it. And there was a gentleman standing next to me who worked at the store and said, well, we're not actually allowed to do anything.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to touch them. We're not allowed to do anything because of this increase in violence, which I hadn't realized. And so this is a major concern for retailers.
Yeah.
And they're saying that 2/3 of inventory loss is coming from employee theft. It's coming from external theft, like the one I just mentioned, but it's also coming from process errors as well, which technology can help with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Process errors have been around forever. I mean, retailers are very familiar with that. And there's just like how there's noise and demand, sometimes there's just inevitable errors that happen in operations. But typically they're much more manageable, identifiable. You can continue to improve upon them. But the theft, that's a difficult one and they're just getting more brazen, like your story, right?
Yeah.
But in a way, technology, I think, is going to end up helping in the long run, not only from just internally what can be improved and the reporting aspects and kind of identifying more granular insights into this, but also just catching these people. Because of the violent aspects, retailers have to pull back. They're telling their employees don't get involved. But just given all of the visual recognition capabilities and the growing amount of surveillance and monitoring and so forth, I mean, I think it's going to come back around and end up catching these people and reducing that. But when that happens,
So definitely
Yeah.
something to think about and watch out for because they are going to come out with this study. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but they're going to focus more on theft. Charlotte, we
Mhm.
are putting the links to the articles in the LinkedIn comments as we speak. So make sure to check that out. And that's it for us here today. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me here. Thank you so much to everybody in the audience. We love to see you. Loved all your comments. And we'll see you back here next week. I'm going to be coming at you live from Cleveland. Thank